Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell in the upper right-hand corner so you are notified each time a brand new episode goes live on YouTube. And I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
What's going on, Nate? It's great to be here.
A lot has happened this week, and ironically, it did not really come from Gamescom, which is currently ongoing in Germany. But today's episode is dedicated to Where's the Direct, who generously donated $300 to support the channel. We thank you for your generosity, and you'd like to support the channel, we have a StreamLabs link in the description below. Donate any dollar amount, ask a question, and we will answer it at the end of the episode. Donate $100 or more, and we will dedicate the episode to you. And today's episode is once again dedicated to Where's the Direct?
Where is the Direct, Nate?
It's coming in September.
Okay.
So, right around the corner. But we're not going to talk about the Direct today. We're going to talk about some big news that has hit this week across the industry, impacting all three companies. And we're going to open with Sony, who shocked the world with a major revelation today when they announced that they are increasing the price of the PlayStation 5 in every territory except for the USA. And the pricing will range, depending on your region, upwards of $50. Generally, it looks like it is an increase between 10 to 20%, depending the region. And this caught a lot of people by surprise. And this affects both SKUs. So this is both the digital edition and the disc drive PlayStation 5. Now, we will be speaking from a place of privilege, as we each have PlayStation 5s.
And we're in North America.
And we are in the United States. Yeah. So we're not impacted by this directly. But we can still give our commentary on it, because this is a bad move for Sony when it comes to optics and consumer relations. This is not something you want to see from the company you favor. This is a situation where you're going to look at Sony and you're going to have a flashback to the Sony of the PlayStation 3 era, which was aptly known as Arrogant Sony. And I've seen it on social media today that Arrogant Sony is back. And it takes a lot for a company to come out here and share that they are raising the price of their hardware. This is unprecedented. So, we usually see prices go down.
Yes.
Not up.
All right, Nate. Let's just get right into it. I'm going to ask you the elephant in the room question. Sony is the market leader, at least according to MPD, as far as profit, right? So why do this? Like, if you are the market leader, then why increase your prices for these PlayStation 5 consoles in most regions in the world? You're right.
Well,
the optics don't look good. So, explain to me why this happened.
So from a business side of things, I want to make clear that I'm talking if I am Sony.
Yes.
I am not in any way justifying their actions.
You're Jim Ryan.
Yes.
Tell me why you did this.
Well, MVG. It's the head of Sony Computer Entertainment. What we're seeing in the industry is that component costs are increasing. You have currency fluctuations in these regions, at least in comparison to the US dollar. The US dollar has held its value quite strong, whereas these regions, their currency value is decreasing. So as a business, you're looking at this saying, we're losing money on every system that we're selling in these regions. And when I say losing money, it's in comparison to what we were making even 12 months ago. Mm-hmm. That's how the situation has changed.
So you're saying by now, we're a couple of years into this generation, that these systems should have kind of started to either break even or make money for Sony, and they haven't. Is that what you're saying?
in a normal world economy situation without high inflation, without component costs rising due to the lingering effects of COVID, we are now 21 months into the generation.
Right.
Cost of these components should have come down, or at least met a baseline where they're ready to come down due to production. I mean, how many PlayStation 5s are out in the wild now? I believe they have sold over 20 million.
20 million, I believe, was the last count we had.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not a low figure. This isn't like the beginning of the generation. This 2 years in, we typically see companies begin to explore the possibility of price drops.
Yes.
Even if it's just a minor price drop of $25, but that's what you begin to see because component prices become more affordable. But in the current economy, those prices are not coming down. Components are going up in price, some due to scarcity and supply and demand still being very difficult for a lot of suppliers to achieve. And Sony is looking at this saying, how do we achieve the financial goal we set internally given the economic situation? And they crunched those numbers and they were able to rationalize that increasing the price in the regions that they have selected, this is a goal that they can do so without much backlash.
So real quick. So you mentioned, we're from a place of privilege. Yes, we are. I mean, we're both in North America. Yes. We already have PS5s, so it doesn't really affect us. But as someone who was an Australian born, I look at that $799.95 price, Nate, and I can tell you, I can't think of a console that was ever that expensive, other than probably a launch model PlayStation 3 that I had to import from Japan or something like that. That's going back a long time. Like, I can't think of a system that ever cost me that much money, like dropping $800 on 800 Australian dollars, I should say, on an Australian PlayStation 5. That is unprecedented, at least from what I recall.
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation that this industry's really never seen before. I don't believe we've ever seen hardware increase in price. I think maybe the PlayStation 4 may have increased in price in certain regions at one point. I'm not 100% certain of that, but it does sound familiar. But we typically see price drops. And this actually paints an interesting scenario for Sony because this price increase for these regions is now permanent.
Yes.
This isn't something that they are going to backtrack on in the next couple of months. This is going to stick likely through at least the next fiscal year. And then when it is time, when prices stabilize across the industry and suppliers for components, are you going to just do a price drop back to the original launch price?
They probably will and take a victory lap and say, hey, look, we did something really good. We dropped the price back to what it was when the system launched, for 20 months.
I mean, it's bad optics. And as we talked about, from the business standpoint, you can understand why they are doing it. They're number crunchers. At the end of the day, they're worried about the bottom line, which is revenue stream and profit.
Is it also fair to say, because I mean, normally, you kind of recoup all your money in software sales and peripherals and whatnot. Now, we already know that Sony has increased the price of their first-party games by $10 across the board. So that is a thing that they've done pretty much since the beginning of the generation. So is the software side kind of different than the hardware side? Because, wouldn't the $10 price increase on the game side help alleviate, the issues they're having on the hardware side? And I will also preface that question by saying that I'm not a marketing guy. I don't know anything about this stuff. This is something that you know a lot more than I do, Nate. But I kind of figured that the $10 game increase would alleviate this stuff. But here we are. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the $10 increase, as we know, they said game budgets were going up.
Yeah.
And the $10 was to help developers, so wages, and
is that true?
And we know at the end, no, the publisher's pocketing that money.
I can't speak for AAA devs because I'm not a AAA dev, but I think that, most developers out there don't even have much insight as to what the game they're making is being priced at. And like you said, they're not really seeing those profits. They're not getting a cut of that. It's all going back to the publisher at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that it would trickle down, that if we raise the price of the game we're selling, that means we can allocate additional funds to the development studio. And that's kind of that utopian viewpoint that you would hope to see in the industry.
Yeah.
But when you have publishers posting record sale or record revenue stream, and you have developers who are still seeking buyers or they're going fully out of business, you can understand that's not what's happening with this $10 increase. So when it looks at the hardware, and when we look at the percentages that this hardware is increasing, I would look at more like accessories with the controller sales, headphones, and stuff like that to kind of offset that. Whatever they're making in profit on the accessories isn't enough to offset what we're seeing with hardware. Now, if you wanted to include digital services like PlayStation Plus as another means of revenue to offset the loss on hardware here, maybe that also isn't enough. Or it's just one of those cases where Sony had a certain goal in mind, and the only way to achieve that goal with the new losses and offsetting what is happening in the component and economic chain is raising the price by this amount. And Sony did their due diligence here. They looked at the figures. This is what they came up with. And they knew going into it, this is bad optics.
Right.
But at the same time, who has seen a PlayStation 5 in the wild?
True.
This isn't going to stop sales.
Yeah.
People have been buying PlayStation 5s for above the MSRP since launch.
Yes.
People have given into scalpers.
Yes, definitely.
And that's second-hand market. So now it's just the second-hand market pricing is going to be standard and official pricing from Sony. And it is a terrible move for the consumer base. And what I'm very surprised by is that Sony didn't do something more clever.
Yeah.
Deceitful, but clever in the sense of, let me make a bundle, which they've already done. We have the hardware. We have the Horizon Forbidden West hardware bundle.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do that bundle. I include that game. And now I just add in something that to Sony is trivial. 3 months of, PlayStation Plus or something.
Yeah, or throwing
and
a
I
copy
sell
of
it.
Sackboy or something. Anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I launch Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Something that they're really not making that much money anymore. A game that sales have slowed.
Yes.
And then I charge you $600 for it. And you look and say, yo, I can get a PS5 in 2 games.
Yes.
And we're sitting, and Sony's sitting there saying, you're really spending $600 on that PlayStation 5.
Right.
Because that's what we've kind of seen from the industry in the past is they create these hardware bundles to disguise the fact that the price of the hardware is not coming down after X amount of months on the market. And it makes you as the consumer feel as though you're getting a deal, but you're actually overpaying for the product on the shelf. Sony instead said, hey, we're raising the price.
Yeah. So why did they increase the price everywhere except in the United States?
My speculation on that is that the omission of the US from this list is I'd say for 2 reasons. The first reason is that the currency fluctuation issue is that the US dollar has held its value.
Yeah.
And the second reason, and likely the key reason, is that Xbox and Microsoft are competitive in this market. When you look at Japan, Europe, Australia, those markets really aren't that big for the Xbox brand.
Right.
That's Sony land if we're not including Nintendo in this equation. So Sony's sitting there saying, we don't really have any direct competition. We can raise the price here, and people don't have really any other option. They're still going to buy our hardware. They're still going to buy our software. maybe you're going to have some who will look to the Xbox now, but overall, these regions are part of the Sony ecosystem, and they're not looking to leave it. North America, PlayStation 5 and the Series line of consoles, they're competing. They are very close in sales, and Sony cannot come into North America and say, we're going to raise the price in the United States by $50, and now you're going to give Microsoft the price advantage? Microsoft would have been on Twitter immediately saying, for $299, you can get an Xbox Series S, get Game Pass, and you have access to all these games, and guess what you're getting early next year? Starfield.
Right.
Well, what is Sony's answer to that? We just increased the price of our hardware?
It's a very, very compelling argument. So just on that real quick, I mean, Microsoft did come out and say, when asked, were they anticipating a price increase for their Xbox? And they came out and said, no, there was nothing planned, which, I mean, it's a marketing statement. It's a statement they're always going to say. They're not going to speculate that they are going to increase the price. But they didn't say, we have no comment or anything. We have nothing to say right now, which is a little different. But I think Microsoft has they're probably not going to increase the price of their hardware. Do you think that they would? Because the way that I see this working is, if Microsoft is going to increase prices somewhere, they'll probably just increase their Game Pass subscription price, especially next year when we see games like Starfield and Forza and Redfall, start to come out. These big games that a lot of people have been waiting for. All of a sudden, they have a little bit more pull where they could say, we're gonna increase our price a little bit. But I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that there will be a response from Microsoft in that they'll increase their hardware costs, or do you think they'll just keep things the way they are, or do you think they may look at Game Pass and kind of increase that cost at some point?
I think the response from Microsoft is going to be a marketing blitz in these regions to emphasize that they are cheaper.
Yep.
That they have a huge catalog of software on Game Pass that's expanding every single week. And that if you feel as though the PlayStation 5 is overpriced in the regions that this is impacting, we have a cheaper alternative for you. That's how I would respond if I am Microsoft. As for a price response, we know Microsoft has increased the price of the Xbox Series line in India by around 6%.
Right.
But I don't think they're going to do it in North America or any other major market, because we know, based on history, Microsoft is okay with losing money on hardware.
Absolutely.
As long as it allows them to increase their user base, and we know what their user base goal is. It's not hardware. It hasn't been hardware since the start of this generation. What they want an install base on is Game Pass.
Right.
They don't care how you get Game Pass, if it's your PC, your phone, your television, or through the Xbox. They want Game Pass subscribers. So it's really not in Microsoft's interest or necessity to raise the price of the Xbox hardware, whereas Sony, they don't have that alternative route of selling services on other hardware like PC. They want to sell you the PlayStation 5, and the PlayStation 5 was too affordable in the current economic environment for them to sell.
That is a good point that you bring up, because the digital model, is $399. Well, it still is here in the US, but that's a pretty competitive price for, a PS5, minus the disk drive, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think, they priced the PlayStation hardware quite competitively, because I think when we were predicting the cost of the PS5, I think I had the one with the drive at $550 and maybe the digital one at $450. So they definitely did come in quite competitive, when they first released the system. So I definitely see why they've done this, but you're absolutely right, Nate. The optics aren't good, and it's just another one of those things that Sony has kind of messed up. But I guess the other question is, how do you increase your hardware and make it, I guess, make it less, less of a blunder. Like, I think they took the right approach and kind of ripped the Band-Aid off. Because, I mean, what if they said, starting January the 1st, right, we're going to increase our prices? I don't know if that's necessarily better or worse in that scenario. Maybe the way they did it is the right way.
I mean, in that scenario, that's probably worse because you're going to have an influx of people saying, well, I need to get a PlayStation 5 now because I don't want to pay more in 4 months, but there's no supply for me to get one now.
Yes.
And then Sony could manipulate the market and the supply chains to not ship a lot of PlayStation 5s, which, I mean, I know with the holiday season, they'd obviously want to sell as many as they could, but also in the back of the mind, you have to think, I'm going to make more so I achieve my financial goals when I sell this hardware in January than now. Right now, if I'm selling it, I'm losing.
Yeah.
So from that point, it's bad from a business. But in terms of just that overall messaging for Sony, I think this is the best route they could have taken given the situation. And it also shows you just how strong demand has been for the PlayStation 5 that Sony could come out and do this. They know that they have their loyal fan base. They know that these fans are going to stay in this ecosystem. And even though this is an unprecedented situation, that the optics are poor, they're ultimately going to get away with this.
Of course. I mean, and we're going to get the next PlayStation showcase, in September, I'm guessing. We're going to see God of War Ragnarok, and we're going to not even think about this anymore,
And I mean, the big thing that I, as the consumer, come away with is if you don't have a PlayStation 5 yet, and it was already priced too highly for you, you're going to wait now potentially 18 months, maybe longer, for the price to come back down to what the system's launched at. And I think the disappointing thing is, and I understand that this is how the free market works, is that Sony did not have to do this. This is them protecting their bottom line. They have boasted high revenue streams, record-breaking profits. Mm-hmm. This is to appease the shareholders.
Right.
And I mean, it's not like Sony is having financial issue. They're not going to lose billions of dollars if they kept the prices where they were.
Yes.
But they want to make their shareholders happy.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is ultimately how business works. And the consumer is left footing the bill. And as we mentioned, I mean, the currency fluctuations, high inflation rates, the average person is hurting. Their wallet is hurting. And Sony even made mention of that in their blog post. And then they say, well, we're going to raise the price. Well, I'm already hurting financially, and you're going to tell me now that this is more expensive. And I mean, I should note that gaming as a hobby is a luxury hobby.
Right.
It is a very expensive hobby. This isn't something that you just, fall into for a few bucks and then invest, low sums of money. Games are expensive. Hardware is expensive. This is just an unprecedented situation we have never seen before. And what's curious is Nintendo is on record earlier this month saying they will not raise the price of the Nintendo Switch. The price is firm. And, they have 3 different models. You have the Lite, standard Switch, the OLED. And Nintendo came out with the OLED saying, yeah, our profit margins really aren't that high on this model. And they're having supply chain issues as well. We touched on Microsoft. And I think Sony's best approach in the situation is they would have had a lot more backlash had the price increase also been in the USA, which is their biggest market.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
They avoided a much more problematic situation, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some people say, well, do you think Sony could potentially walk this back due to backlash.
No.
This is firm. This is set.
Yeah.
This was a calculated decision where they chose the regions specifically because they know they can get away with it. And I also saw some conversation saying, well, this is reason that this generation should have been delayed. And I just don't understand that rationalization, because when people said this generation should have been delayed, going back to 2020, a lot of it had to do with the software.
Yes.
That we weren't seeing a lot of exclusive software for this generation. And if we were going to rely so heavily on cross-gen games, well, maybe Sony and Microsoft could have waited till 2021 to bring out their respective platforms. But what's happening now, it wouldn't have alleviated anything had they waited. This was going to happen. So all that would have happened, I guess, potentially, had they delayed these systems 2 years, is they wouldn't have launched at $500.
Right.
They would have launched at $550 or $600.
Right.
Or, whatever price point they would have had to come in on. So it wouldn't have really stop anything from happening.
That's a good point too. And I think, there's a lot of games obviously that have come out for both systems. We've got the Gran Turismo and God of War and Forbidden West. Those games would still come out for the PS5 anyway. So I think you're right, Nate. I don't think delaying the system really would have made much difference at all. In fact, it probably would have hurt them more than it would have helped, I would say, because people want to get to the next generation. Developers want to work on modern hardware. They don't want to work on a system from 2013. So I think Sony was right, and I think both Xbox and Sony were right releasing their systems when they did. The question was really about, like you said, the software side, not the hardware side. So I think they made the right choice. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think if they did increase the price in America, in the US, that wouldn't have been a good day for Sony. I mean, I think, again, optics today wasn't great, but I think you're right. They dodged a bullet if they, that they didn't increase the price in the US. And they probably wanted to, but decided it wasn't the right move. Because you're right. Their biggest competition, is Nintendo and Xbox. All Microsoft needs to do is say, okay, Sony, well, we're going to take $50 off the price of that Series S as our entry-level system. And that would be enough, I think, for them to get really, really nervous about, the next 12 months.
And one thing to be clear on is the PlayStation brand is strong.
Oh, yeah.
If the PlayStation brand was not strong, they would not be able to do what they just did.
Absolutely right.
They're getting away with it.
Yeah, you said calculated risk, and that's exactly what this was. Yeah.
They know they can get away with it, and that is why they did it. And as you mentioned earlier, the second a September showcase airs, this is going to fade away. This is going to be like dust in the wind.
Right.
Because hype over the next wave of software is going to pollute the airwaves. And the person saying today in one of the regions impacted saying, that price is ridiculous. When they show a game like, just as a random example, Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake.
Go on.
All of a sudden that hype is there and you're saying, yo, I need a PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
And Sony knows that. And it's almost surprising that they did not pair this announcement with a bigger showcase to kind of soften the blow.
Well, that is interesting you say that, because I think there's going to be a show imminently, right? We feel like there's something happening in September. I think that's a safe bet to say that Sony's going to. And yeah, look, Ragnarok is definitely going to be there, but they may have some big surprises for us for next year. And depending on what they show, you're right, that conversation about a price increase is going to be quickly forgotten. If they basically dangle these new shinies in front of everyone and say, hey, look what we've got coming out in the next 12 to 18 months, we've been working really hard and here's what we got. Yeah, you're right. The message quickly changes. But I have a question for you. What do you think the PlayStation VR 2 price is going to be? Because I don't think it's a coincidence that they didn't give us a price when they announced it was coming early 2023. Do you think they're still trying to figure out pricing right now? Do you think it's that, or do you think they already have a price in mind? It's really just a matter of the right time to disclose it.
I don't think it's a coincidence that they didn't give the pricing of PSVR 2 or the DualSense Edge the exact same week the PlayStation 5 sees a price increase. I think all of this was calculated. And I'm sure they have the price points for the Edge and PSVR 2 already in mind. But could you imagine if they had come out this week and announced a $200 controller?
Oof. Could be.
Easily.
Yeah, it could easily be 200.
Easily. I would estimate $175 to $200 for that controller.
Yeah.
If it comes in lower, wow, like, good job, Sony, on pricing that.
So
but
I initially thought that PSVR 2 would retail at $499, but now I'm not so sure anymore. I think it's going to be closer to
I'm kind of the mentality of $649, $699.
Damn. I mean, you can't rule it out, especially based on what's just happened here.
Based on what's happening here, and then look at what PSVR 2 is going to actually feature.
Yeah.
Look at the screens. Right. Look at the technology. If this was a PC headset, it would easily be $1,000.
Yes.
So that's why I would not be surprised if it's in the range close to $700.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A lot.
Yeah, it's a lot more than I initially thought it would be.
And yeah, I believe that they didn't give a price right now because it would have just been way too much bad optics for them in terms of pricing. Yeah. Now, you look like the premium price company out there, and you're pricing a lot of people out. And again, it's a luxury hobby. I understand that. And again, we're talking from that place of privilege where we're not impacted by this price change, and we have the system. But ultimately, this is a bad stretch of marketing for Sony to do this. Like we said, from a business standpoint, I understand why they're looking at the numbers, crunching them, and coming up saying, we can get away with this. But they didn't have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have to. This is corporate greed. And, it's kind of one of those situations where if you want to stick it to Sony, if you live in Europe, UK, Japan, China, Australia, Mexico, Canada, any of these regions that have been impacted, the only way you can do so is you see a PlayStation 5 on the shelf, you don't buy it.
Right.
I'm not saying you have to go buy a Switch or an Xbox in retaliation. If you don't buy the systems in these regions, Sony will sit there and say, okay, this didn't take. We have to cut the price, even if they slash off $25 or half of what they just raised, to kind of make a goodwill gesture to the fan base in these, these markets. Otherwise, they're going to get away with this because they know they can, because their ecosystem and the brand are too strong in these areas.
Yep. And it's no coincidence, too, that they just stopped reporting PlayStation 4 numbers as well, So now I feel like now is, they've drawn that line in the sand and said, okay, I guess you could say in many ways, Nate, this is truly when the generation starts. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, like you said, they could cut the price, 12 to 18 months from now back to where it was. And they'll take a victory lap, for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those rare instances where being an early adopter actually had a financial benefit.
Yeah.
And it's not usually the case. And I'm not saying that as a celebratory humble brag, because this is a situation that we should never see in the industry. This is a dark day. And, I feel for the people in these regions who are getting exploited by Sony for, taking advantage of their brand loyalty in these markets.
Well,
and it's a shame that Microsoft isn't more competitive in these markets so that Sony couldn't get away with such a maneuver.
I mean, I think the other thing that we haven't really talked about is their push into the PC market. You know, there's definitely some room to say, well, you know, if you're not happy with these prices that we're charging for our consoles, then you can wait 12 months for our games to appear on Steam and on the PC. You know, I think
that's true.
That push is going to continue as well. So, I mean, as a consumer, you always have a choice in what you want to do, and Sony is offering these games on the PC. I think most games will end up eventually on the PC, but you're also gonna have to wait. I don't think this whole concept of day and date will ever, you know, happen on the PC. I think, you know, Ragnarok will eventually end up on PC, but it's probably 12 months from now. You know, so
yes.
You know, you can as a consumer, you have many choices here. You can either not pay the money, as you know, as it's your right to do. You could just buy a PlayStation 4 version of the game until the day actually comes when there is no more PS4 first-party titles, or you can wait 12 months for a PC version, which hopefully you have a powerful enough PC to run those games on. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting press release announcement. For my friends and family in Australia, I feel for you guys because that $7.99 price. I don't know if I could pony up that much money for a game console. It's a lot of money.
No, I mean, it's kind of like when the PlayStation 3 launched back in the day. I waited for the first price drop.
Yeah, same.
I wasn't paying full sticker
for
a PlayStation 3. And if I didn't have a PlayStation 5 right now and I was in one of the impacted markets, I'm waiting. And I mean, it's also one of those situations where Sony, you don't have any true must-have PlayStation 5 exclusive software right now where I have to invest more money. You're not giving me incentive to pay more money for your hardware.
Yeah.
The only reason you're getting away with this again is your brand is strong in these areas and there's no strong competition. So you can get away with it. And we can go to the second topic of today's episode, which is more of a curiosity. It's that Denuvo, the notorious DRM for PC games, has officially been announced that it has Nintendo Switch support. And some of the fine details are that Nintendo is not involved with this in any way. So if you saw any reports that were implying that Nintendo has some sort of involvement here, that is inaccurate. That supposedly the Denuvo for Switch was developed in response to strong demand from clients. They claim performance won't be affected, and that online checks will not be used. Now, since I am not a PC gamer, I have had no firsthand experience with Denuvo. But MVG, you have made videos about Denuvo, and it's horrid.
Yes, it is.
DRM.
Yeah, I mean, so let's kind of walk through this a little bit. So for those people that don't know, Denuvo is a digital rights management. It's one of the most effective ones out there on the market to date. There's been many attempts at DRM over the years. Most of them have been promptly dispatched. Denuvo is one that is basically different for every single game. So it's not like, you know, if you crack Denuvo, then, you know, you've beaten it for life. Every single game has its own DRM measure in place. So every game needs to be cracked, you know, by itself, right? So just because you cracked Denuvo on PC for one game doesn't mean that you can take that same approach and do it somewhere else. So it's one of those DRMs that has a very, very high success rate. I'm not saying it's foolproof or it's perfect. It's definitely been defeated. But it's coming to the Switch. And I think you're right, Nate. You know, it's something that Nintendo is not it's not something that Nintendo has, is the one that's kind of playing this card. Like they're not the ones that have manufactured this or engineered this. This is something that the company themselves, based on their discussions with third parties that work on the Switch, have identified a gap in the market where they are clearly unhappy with, at least from what we've been told, from piracy that's been rampant on the Nintendo Switch. And, it's no secret or surprise that the Switch is notorious for game leaks and early versions of games coming out on Reddit, weeks before the game actually was released in the stores. We've seen this happen so many times before that Nintendo they've tried, different measures, but they can't stop these leaks from happening. Everything gets released before street date, and that's just the reality of it. And emulators are so good now that a lot of games just run on these Switch emulators without any kind of modification. And in many ways, they run better than the Switch version because you can up-res and run at 60 FPS. So Denuvo has basically stepped in and said, hey, we can offer a service where we can provide our DRM to stop from these games, A, getting leaked early, and B, running on emulators before they even get released on the Switch. And I don't necessarily think it's just they want to stamp out these games leaking early and coming out on emulators before, but I think they just want to mitigate the amount of piracy that's going on. So based on all that, Denuvo claims that they have a solution that runs on the Switch that doesn't have any online checks, which for me is interesting because my understanding was, and I'm not a big expert on Denuvo, like I know enough about it, but my understanding was there was always a online check, and that was one of the things they did. But essentially the way Denuvo works, and I don't want to get too technical because I don't want to bore everyone to death, but basically what happens is the game, the DRM runs a sort of emulator, and everything, the game itself is kind of running in this kind of sandbox that Denuvo sets up. And every single call, like every single line of code is essentially encrypted. And the Denuvo virtual machine manages kind of the encryption and decryption of data. So it's very, very secure and very difficult to crack, as I mentioned. Now, the part that I have some issue with is that, they're saying that it doesn't have any impact on performance. Now, by definition, because you're running an extra process that's basically sitting there managing the encryption and decryption of data and making sure that files haven't been tampered with or in any way, by definition, that's a false statement. There has to be some process that's running that manages this, right? And I think the concern is, and again, like we don't really know what this is going to look like until Denuvo releases start appearing for the Switch, but I'll come back to that here in a sec. But we don't really know how much of a performance hit we're going to get. We're going to get something. And I think the concern is that, number one, what does that look like? Because we know a lot of third-party Switch games right now have some difficulty with performance. So is that going to take away more performance from the game? In theory, it will. But what does that look like as far as percentages go? We don't know the answer to that. And I guess the second thing is, how does it affect things like heat and battery life? You're running these processes in the background to manage the DRM for you. It means it's going to use up some battery and it's going to use up, it's going to generate more heat. So I guess those things do remain to be seen. Now, Denuvo PR came out and said, it's not going to affect anything. That's what they say. But it does. It's something that I didn't make a video on. People were asking me to kind of cover it on the channel and everything. But look, at the end of the day, I'm not really going to look at this until there is some Denuvo releases that come out for the Switch. And I don't know when that will be. I think I want to say the third parties that are probably looking at this that have been talking to Denuvo are the same ones that we see on the PC. And the two main suspects there would be Ubisoft, because all their Assassin's Creed games, or not all of them, but at least the last batch ran Denuvo, and Capcom, their Resident Evil games on PC, all of them had Denuvo for some time. So I would say that those two companies are the ones that have requested this. But yeah, it's very interesting to see this coming out for the Switch. It's not a huge surprise. I think a lot of people were kind of blaming Nintendo for it. Again, don't blame Nintendo. They're not the ones that asked for this. I mean, they'll certainly welcome it because it will help with the fight on piracy. But at the end of the day, this one is something that I'm just going to wait on and see what it looks like. If it truly does impact battery life and performance of these games, then it's something that is not going to really surprise me, because Denuvo has had a long kind of checkered past on stuff like that happening on the PC anyway. So a lot of people are kind of very nervous about it, and I think a lot of people are also questioning why is this happening? This is a game console. Why would you put DRM on a game console? But I think we already answered that with the emulation stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much what's happening with Denuvo, what it looks like, and what to expect. I would say Denuvo is not a good thing. DRM in general is not a good thing. But let's see what it looks like. I'm definitely going to keep interested in what games do come out with Denuvo, and we'll do some benchmarking and some tests and stuff like that, and see what the results are. I'd be shocked if there was no performance no performance decreases like what the PR said, because there's definitely going to be at least something.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I saw a lot of the conversation, as you mentioned, where people were blaming Nintendo, and as Denuvo even came out, Nintendo did not come out and commission this.
No.
And this is something that, even though their PR claims this was in response to strong demand from clients, we may never actually see a piece of software released for the Switch that utilizes Denuvo.
That's right. Yep.
This is now a DRM solution that will be available to Switch partners.
It's also something that can get patched out later on. So I know Capcom do this a lot. So when they're releasing a Resident Evil game on PC, they'll have Denuvo in place for about 12 months, and then eventually they'll release a patch where they just remove it. And the reason why they do that, Nate, is because they want to maximize the amount of sales they can get. Usually, usually sales are largest in the first, X number of months of release. So they want to kind of mitigate the amount of piracy that's going on, the amount of people, making illegal backups and stuff like that. And eventually they'll remove it, because I don't know what the licensing model looks like or what you pay, but I don't think it's you pay once and you get it for life. I think it's a rolling subscription that you get it, year in, year out type of thing. And I would expect a similar thing to happen here, where the game will come out, it'll have Denuvo on it, but eventually it will just get patched out, when the sales period has kind of cooled down for that particular game.
Yeah, this is one of those long-term developing stories where this could develop into nothing, or it could develop into a very real problem for the Switch. But at the moment, it's just a curiosity.
Yeah, it's a press release. It's coming. We don't know what it looks like. I hope it doesn't have any real-world impacts. And should also mention that Sony has this on PlayStation 4 and 5. So this is not something that's unique to the Switch or unique to game consoles. We think of Denuvo as something that is DRM for PCs, but that's not true. I know Sony has access to Denuvo middleware DRM as well, should the developer again choose to utilize it. But it comes at a cost, and I think it's not cheap either to have. So I'm kind of targeting Capcom and Ubisoft as the two kind of suspects for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely going to be curious to see who is the first company out of the gate with the Denuvo on the Switch, if any company actually leaves the stable with Denuvo implemented.
Don't be surprised that Mario Rabbids 2 has it.
That would be a pretty quick turnaround.
I guess you're right. I mean, maybe it's probably a little too quick, but whatever Capcom is cooking up for next year, they may look at it as well. But I would say those two companies are the ones that are probably the biggies for wanting this.
You don't think it would come from maybe an indie studio who would rely being strictly digital only on the platform?
It's possible, but I also wonder. And again, I don't really know the licensing model of what Denuvo costs, and maybe they have some incentives for smaller companies to jump on. But yeah, I mean, anything is possible, I would say. But at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds like you want to maximize your sales, but they could have a smaller indie, use it. I don't really know what the landscape looks like, but I think Denuvo in general is kind of geared more for the big AAA games because those companies have, the money to kind of throw around on stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting thing to watch because, I mean, as you detailed, it can impact the performance, and you don't want that when you're playing a game, even if it is something like a 10% performance hit. If that is impacting frame rate or frame buffer and any type of performance, it's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm really surprised that you do see so many companies who continue to utilize this, because every time, especially like Capcom, whenever they put a release on PC, it's discovered that Denuvo is there.
Yeah.
There is massive outcry about it. And you would think there has to be a better solution that these, companies can find, or that there'd be another, middleware company with their own DRM solution that isn't as oppressive as Denuvo to come out, that these companies could potentially implement in future releases. So
the other thing Denuvo adds, and not many people talk about this, but it significantly increases file size as well. Because like I mentioned, it basically installs a virtual machine around the game. So it significantly increases the file size. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a big deal, but it could be. It could mean that a physical game or a digital game jumps over that 8 gigabyte threshold into the 16 gigabyte cartridge size, stuff like that. It definitely has an impact. And I guess the other thing to add is, let's say, and I'm going to pick on Mario Rabbids 2. I'm not saying it's coming out with Denuvo. It probably won't, but let's say Mario Rabbids 2 comes out and it has Denuvo on it. If the frame rates are all over the place, if it's kind of choppy or it's got frame issues, there's always going to be that perception that Denuvo is the cause of this. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. Right. All of a sudden, you're kind of blaming it on DRM because people know it's there. They have to disclose it. So, it will be interesting to see how this translates to the Switch. Hopefully no games end up using it, but let's assume they do. Hopefully it doesn't impact the user experience in any way. And I think that's the real sad part about this. It's not the pirates, it's not the emulation people that are going to be hurt by this. If this truly does impact performance or the hardware or the game, then it's the paid customers that ultimately are the ones that feel this. And I think, Denuvo are saying all the right things because that's what they do, but it'll remain to be seen, what this looks like when we finally see at least one game come out.
Right. And when and if that will be is a mystery waiting to be solved.
Hopefully never.
Hopefully never. We can now go into some StreamLabs questions for this week. And our first comes from Ride the Walrus, who donated $5. And they write, how do you know if you'll need to pre-order a game in order to get a physical copy? Specifically, I'm thinking about the upcoming Switch release of Nier, Bayonetta 1, and Bayonetta 3 on the Switch. If you'll need to pre-order games, so I assume you mean it'll have a limited print. I mean, you really don't know. Usually you can gauge it on the publisher.
Yeah.
And kind of the game itself, if it appears to be more of a niche type of game, or if the publisher is forthcoming and tells you it's going to be a limited release. Like, I don't think Nier is going to be too limited in terms of availability. Bayonetta 1, I could see becoming scarce in maybe 3 to 6 months. Bayonetta 3 should have ample retail stock for at least the first year.
Yeah, for at least 12 months.
But yeah, you really don't know unless the publisher makes it clear, or if the release itself just appears to be a smaller release. Maybe something like the Digimon game you could look at and say this would probably be a limited print, maybe just a few print runs.
I think Live Alive is another game that potentially could fit into that as well.
Maybe. But I could see that be like a solid first year of availability and then trickle down.
But a game like Bayonetta 1, I mean, it did come out in that double pack, right? Like,
yes, in Japan.
And it's one of those games where you know that this physical version isn't going to stick around very long. But most of the time, you kind of have to look at the marketing or maybe the lack thereof around a particular release and make your own kind of judgment calls on that.
Yes. Then had a $1 donation from Jackie G, who writes, "Do you think Jim Ryan plays games?" No. I mean, his favorite game is Jumping Flash on the PlayStation 1. So he was probably playing games back then, but I don't think he's been playing games for a while. It may shock a lot of people, but I mean, there are some video game executives and higher ups who do play games. Phil Spencer is a gamer.
Phil plays games.
Yoshida is a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe something like Reggie Fils-Aimé was actually playing video games in his spare time,
no,
I have a bridge to sell you.
Do you think Doug Bowser plays video games?
No.
I don't think so.
I mean, you can YouTube this, and I encourage people to do it. YouTube Reggie playing Mario Kart 7 on the 3DS.
Oh, God. I haven't seen this.
It's hilarious because he just crashes into the wall a whole bunch in the first lap, and you can tell he doesn't know what he's doing. And if you don't even want to YouTube that, just remember when he played Smash Brothers at E3 on stage.
Yeah, I remember that.
And jumped off the stage.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I don't know why Nintendo of America didn't sit him down for like an hour a day for that, a week leading up to that, saying, "Here are the basic controls, Reggie. We don't want to put you out there and you look like a fool." But he put him out there and he looked, I mean, he had a good humor with it where he's like, "Oh," but it's just, don't go to Twitter and be like, "I have 900 hours on Dragon Quest 9. No, you don't.
Right.
You left the game running in the background. Yeah, Jim Ryan doesn't play games. Oh, man. Then had a $5 donation from Nikki, who writes, "I love the content that you both produce and look forward to each new installment of this show. Nate especially has a perfect voice for radio and is very soothing to listen to. Smiley face." Thank you. We then had a $300 donation from Where's the Direct, whom this episode is dedicated to. No question. Or maybe their name is the question. And as we answered,
and we already answered it. I mean,
we answered at the start of the episode, September. We then had a $2.32 donation from David Cast JRPGs. And they write, "Thanks for the great shows as always. Am I crazy for still hoping for Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD this year? I do not believe you are crazy to hope for that. And ideally, we have the answer in the next couple of weeks, or when both? The September Direct airs."
Do we get both, or do we get one of those two?
That is $1 million question. Ideally, we get both in a dual pack, because I think that would be good value. Charging $60 for those individually, considering they're really just going to be the Wii U versions, is kind of a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be the best path for marketing if I'm Nintendo. Then had a $1.84 donation from Toast. They write, Nate, when will Nintendo release Advance Wars? The war in Ukraine will be going on for years, and they're not refunding pre-orders. So Nintendo needs to release the game or give us a date. Otherwise, people paid for a product that Nintendo is not delivering. I'd say let's see what September brings.
I don't think it's coming out.
Ever?
No, I think it'll come out eventually, but I don't think we're going to hear about it in September. I don't know when it's coming, though.
They really, even if they don't want to give a date, I think they need to communicate something where, even if it's simple as we will give an update regarding release timing of this project in the coming months, just some sort of communication to allow us to have some idea of what's happening with the release, because we understand why it was delayed. We understand the real world situation with Russia and Ukraine. Just communicate us some form of update. You can't leave it on your release schedule report as to be determined.
I think one day out of the blue, they're just going to, on Twitter, just be like, here's the trailer and here's the release date, and then not even acknowledge anything else. But I don't think it's going to be in a direct, and I don't know when that will be. I mean, it could be next year. For all we know.
Yeah, I could see early next year. I mean, we're kind of at the point where we're reaching poetic territory where it could potentially release December this year, 1 year after its original release date, before Way Forward had delayed it a little deeper into the calendar year. And then we'd be entering 2023, where we could potentially see it release in April, 1 year from the brand new release date it was given. So maybe we just see a full-on year delay. Ideally, we get an answer soon, though. We then had a $2 donation from Sonic Go. They write, why has Nintendo abandoned so many beloved franchises? Star Fox, Donkey Kong, Golden Sun, Wave Race, Eternal Darkness, F-Zero, Wario Land, Kid Icarus. The list goes on. Instead, we get 3 brand new Kirby games on Switch. What?
Damn.
What's wrong with Kirby games?
Yeah. you kind of had me there for a minute, but then you lost me at the end. I don't think Nintendo's abandoned anything. Like, you can't say that Star Fox, there'll never be another Star Fox game, or there'll never be another F-Zero game. I feel like those things, while they're dormant right now, will resurface at some point. When that will be, I couldn't say. But it's I don't think it's the right thing to say that, you know, they've been abandoned.
Yeah, maybe, I mean,
Eternal
Star
Darkness
Fox Eternal Darkness has probably been abandoned, yes. Though they continue to renew that trademark.
They do, yeah.
But Star Fox, I mean, we just had it on the Wii U. We'll get another Star Fox game. It's all about timing. When is the right time, and what is the right concept to bring some of these IPs back with? Golden Sun, I mean, they probably really kind of have to figure out the right way to approach that series, because you told a great story with the first 2 games on the Game Boy Advance. The DS entry wasn't great. Wave Race, I mean, that can really come down to NST.
Right.
Is no longer what they were during the GameCube and N64 generation. They are a shell of their former self. F-Zero is another case of it just has to be the right time for F-Zero. And hey, next year is the 20th anniversary of F-Zero GX.
Whoa.
Let's will that into reality. Wario Land. I mean, there hasn't been a Wario Land in a long time. We had Wario World, I believe it was, on the GameCube by Treasure.
Yeah.
Kid Icarus. Kid Icarus is one of those or franchises I see people bring up a lot. Before Kid Icarus Uprising, was anyone really that big of a fan of Kid Icarus?
Not really.
It was on what, the NES and the Game Boy?
On the NES and the Game Boy, yeah. And they're good games. But
it was absent for 20 years.
Right.
It's not like it's an IP that we gut a new entry every generation. But we have the rumors out there or the job listings that Bandai Namco is working on a Nintendo game where they're doing some 3D background. Maybe Kid Icarus Uprising is getting a remaster for the Switch. Donkey Kong has a lot of rumors. Most of the franchise you mentioned here have the potential of coming back in, the next few years. And come on, Kirby games are good. Go Kirby. Then had a $2 donation from Challenger Red. Writes, Nate, what is the future of the Mario Maker franchise? Do you think it's dead? Or will we get a Mario Maker 3 at some point? If we do get a third game, will it be more 2D creation? Or will they introduce 3D world creation? I honestly think Mario Maker is dead.
Yeah, I agree. Like, they were really onto something with the Wii U version. The Switch version just didn't nail that landing, I don't think. And I'm not really sure what they want to do with it next.
It really felt like an unnecessary sequel that they had no passion in.
Right.
They put it out and kind of like, yeah, have fun. We didn't care about it. If you do, great. If not, we don't go. Honestly, before reading this question, I kind of forgot Mario Maker 2 even came out to the Switch.
What if they made a Metroid Maker?
Ooh.
Think about that.
With the NES style sprites, would you go all the way up to Super NES, or would you go to Dread?
You would go to Super NES, and then they would the next Switch would have the one that had the Dread.
I think Maker, as an IP or a franchise of itself, has potential. If you don't focus strictly on Mario, if you went to other 2D games, Kid Icarus, Metroid, really anything that was on the NES or Super NES, I think that would have potential over a Mario Maker 3. Mm-hmm. But I kind of feel as though the game creation idea is something Nintendo isn't going to come back to anytime soon either.
Not for a while.
Then had a $3 donation from Kayak. Right after Nintendo introduces Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color to NSO, where do they go from there? Will we get GameCube, DS, 3DS, and eventually Wii games on Switch? Or maybe Switch 2? Or maybe GameCube and up could be exclusive to NSO for the new Switch.
Wait, so he announced that Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color was coming? That's
expecting.
There's a pretty good chance that Game Boy and Game Boy Color's already been done and
just get announced. Waiting for the time.
Game Boy Advance, we know that Sloop is a thing, but we've talked about this before. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate to the NSO service. It could, but I guess to answer the question, assuming those things do happen, what's after that? Honestly, I think nothing. I think that's what you get, this generation. I don't expect GameCube to show up on the NSO. Like
DS, I know they have a DS emulator.
The problem with DS is how do you translate some of these games with the dual screens? I know there's different things you can do, but the overall user experience needs to be dialed in very well, I think, before Nintendo would approve it for a launch on the NSO.
Like DS in handheld mode, you can see how it would work.
Yeah.
The problem is then going to docked mode because when DS was on the Wii U, you still had the touch screen if you needed. So you could, you played. You're not going to have that dual communication.
Right.
So if you were playing docked with Switch, you're going to have to rely on gyro of some kind for the, touchscreen placement input. And it can be done. It's just considerable work, which would probably mean NSO would have to have a price increase. And
what you're basically saying, Nate, is each game needs to be kind of tailored to work. And that's more than just an emulator that runs a bunch of games. That's it's almost ports at that point. It's not ports because you're still emulating the stuff, but you're modifying these games. You're tweaking them to run on the Switch. I've always had a question around the DS. Like, do I think the DS is capable of running on the Switch? Yes, absolutely. I don't think that's in question. But I just never got my head around how they would solve for the dual screen in a docked environment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like just spitballing an idea here, and not to get this question, too deep. Could you make a Bluetooth controller with a touchscreen input that could communicate with the docked Switch that they would sell, like they sell the N64, NES, Super NES controllers?
You could do that.
I mean, ideally, you would almost just say you have a phone, you have a tablet.
Right.
We have now released an app called the DS app.
Right.
But that's almost too forward thinking, I feel, for Nintendo.
Yeah, I agree.
Then had a $10 donation from Lasagna Cat. So I guess Garfield.
Garfield, yeah.
Yes. Hates Mondays. And normal. Do you think it's more likely that a fourth company enters the console market or that one of the three falls out? Love the show. Thank you both for all the hours of entertainment you guys have provided me. Smiley face.
Oh, that's a good question. What's more likely to happen? I guess another company comes in?
I just can't envision who the fourth company would be.
I know. I mean, we've seen Google with Stadia and Apple with their device and Amazon with their stuff, but no one's actually come in and said, "Hey, we've got some brand new game hardware here." Unless Valve, takes the plunge and makes their own game console.
Well, I mean, I guess could we include Valve in that sense that they have entered with like Steam Deck and such?
I guess we could.
Or is it a little niche?
It's a little niche. I mean, Steam Deck is selling well, but it's still very much that enthusiast handheld. I want to play PC games on the go market.
I could see Microsoft fall out in the sense of Xbox is no longer their priority,
right?
Where they're putting Game Pass on every other screen, in the in our lives,
right?
And Xbox is just the second priority, which they're already kind of transitioning to, where almost we don't even track it, like in terms of sales.
Yeah.
And that's how we consider them falling out. But I mean, Sony's not leaving. Nintendo, this is their business.
Oh yeah, this is what they do.
So,
yeah, they're not going away. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think if one of those three were going to fall out, it would be Xbox. But you're right. Only from a hardware perspective, I think, if they did that, they would already have a significant market share of devices that run Game Pass, so they don't have to focus on the hardware side as much. But I don't know. It's a good question. Like, I think we can't really imagine life without Xbox, Sony, and Microsoft. But it's also hard to imagine another player coming in, like a fourth serious competitor coming in and trying to disrupt the market. It sounds unbelievable to think about, at this juncture.
Mm-hmm. Then had a $1.69 donation from Mr. Stud Muffin, who writes video games. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. For the follow-up $1.69 donation from Mr. Stud Muffin, what are some games that would be significantly shorter if you simply had the ability to jump?
God of War. 2018.
Would it be shorter?
Jump to the end mountain that you're supposed to get to, right? So you can. Everyone's played the game, but
do you just spoil it?
You just you take the corpse that you're supposed to take, and jump there.
Final Fantasy VII Remake. You
that's a good one.
Jump to the top of Shinra headquarters instead of having That always annoyed me with those type of games where you have this epic battle and you're jumping off trains and you're in the air, you're practically flying, and then in the game it's walk up 50 flights of stairs. Like, I can fly.
Right.
Why am I walking?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, don't ask questions. We then had a follow-up $1.69 donation from Mr. Studleton. They write, realistically, would you ever do a face reveal, or would the general public simply not be able to handle the beauty of Nate the Hate? It is the latter. My beauty would blind you and your faces would melt like in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
There you go.
And I don't want to do that to my community. And I mean, the reason I haven't done like a face reveal, do live on camera, is kind of a case of, I mean, one, it's for just for privacy. And there's really no net win to doing it. Let's say I appear on camera and I'm handsome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, great. People are going to be like, wow, Nate's handsome. Okay. Now, possibility number 2, I'm just average looking guy. Okay. People say, oh, look, that's Nate.
Yeah.
Cool. Now let's say I'm ugly. Now I'm going to get abuse because I'm ugly. So it's either I'm going to get admiration,
mm-hmm.
acceptance, or abuse. I don't need any of those 3. But yeah, it's really, I mean, just for privacy's sake, and I really don't have any interest in showing face. It's also kind of a social experiment when I really started it.
Right.
Where there is a belief on a psychological level and social level that when you see a face and you can be subconsciously attracted to it, just where you find it not necessarily attractive to the point where, you know, you want to be with the person or you're going to flirt, but you could have a friendly appearance. Yeah. So what they say, you're going to believe more than if a person that you found to be unattractive, if they said the exact same thing, mm-hmm. you would say, well, I don't trust that person because of their appearance.
Right.
But if someone that you found attractive said the exact same thing, you believe it. Whereas if you just hear a voice, the voice tone, delivery will obviously influence whether you believe, disbelieve, agree, disagree. And that's the avenue I decided to go with. I want to see if tone and delivery and how people would react and consume what is being shared here. So I think it's an interesting social experiment to see that. And I mean, now I could also explore that avenue. Now, if you saw me, would you be more likely to believe or disagree with what I'm saying? Mm. So maybe one day my curiosity will get the better of me and I'll navigate that path. Then had a $1 donation from Where is Star Fox? Says, Nate, I don't care what anyone says. Drake is coming spring 2023 at the earliest, 6 years after original Switch. No way is that a pro model or revision after 6 entire years. This will be marketed as the Switch 2 and will mark a new gen for Nintendo. It's entirely possible that Nintendo depends to market that way. I mean, I know dev kits with DLSS are in the wild. Developers are actively working with them. What Nintendo decides to position the hardware as is up to Nintendo. Developers know it's a Switch. They are working with a new Switch.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's for Nintendo to decide. As for timing, I still am anticipating first half of 2023. I haven't heard anything to make me sway off that belief. That is communication I have received continuously. So till I hear otherwise, I'm expecting it in the first half of 2023. Be it March or May. Sometime within those opening 6 months, though. Hopefully we find out sooner rather than later. We then had a $3 donation from P. Deck Orty, I think, who writes, is there anything you are able to tell us about the new Fire Emblem game in development? Thank you both. Love the show. We hopefully hear something about it soon. Ideally, it gets announced and given a general release window in the September Direct. I believe it still has a very realistic chance of releasing this fiscal year. I've put out a lot of information about this earlier this year. You know, the main protagonist has, red and blue hair, details like that. It's a brand new game. It's not a direct sequel to Three Houses. This is a whole new installment, new cast of characters. Some lords from previous games will be featured in the game to a certain capacity. This is all stuff I've reiterated. I'm just reiterating information that I've previously shared, but really nothing new to share on it. I think the information I gave earlier this year and over recent months is more than sufficient to set expectation. But that is the last StreamLabs question for this week. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a StreamLabs link in our description below. Donate any dollar amount. Ask a question. We will answer it at the end of the episode. Donate $100 or more, and we will dedicate the episode to you. And today's episode is dedicated to Where's the Direct? September. And I'd like to thank my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer, for joining me as always.
Always a pleasure, Nate. Thanks for having me on.
It's always a delight, and you were able to educate us on Denuvo and what it means for the Nintendo Switch. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give the video a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Let us know your thoughts on the PlayStation 5 price increase and Denuvo coming to Switch in the comments section below. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.